Hi, folks. Welcome back to Toby Talks. I'm your host, Toby Hoy, and today we're going to tackle one of the most challenging issues that every leader faces, and that is resistance to change. If you've ever announced a new initiative only to be met with the wall, the crossed arms, the heavy sighs, or the dreaded phrase of, but we've always done it this way, then this episode is for you. Here's the plain truth. Change is inevitable in any thriving organization. Markets shift, technologies evolve, and customer expectations transform. But here's what most leadership books won't tell you: that resistance to change isn't the enemy, it's actually valuable information. And today I'm going to show you how to harness it. Over the next 30 or so minutes, we'll explore why people resist change, how to identify the root causes in your team, and most importantly, review some proven strategies to transform resistance into engagement. Whether you're implementing new software, restructuring your department, or shifting company culture, these principles will help you lead your team through the transition successfully. So let's dive in. We'll start with a fundamental question. Why do people resist change? Most leaders assume that it's stubbornness or laziness. But after working with numerous teams through major transitions, I can tell you that that is almost never the case. Resistance is almost always rooted in something deeper and something that is much, much more human. Think about it from your own experience. When was the last time that you resisted a change in your personal or professional life? Maybe it was a new company policy, a reorganization, or even a new software system. What was really going on beneath the surface? Research shows us that resistance typically falls into one of four core categories. And as we go through these, I want you to listen for these on your own teams. First, there is the fear of the unknown. When you announce a change, you might see the complete picture, but your team members often do not. They're wondering, will I still be good at my job? Will my role become obsolete? Will I have to learn completely new skills? This one right there is particularly acute among your top performers, the people who have absolutely mastered the current process or current system and built their identity around being excellent at it. The second category is loss of control. Change is often imposed from above, and that strips people of their autonomy. Even if the change is objectively positive, the feeling of being done to rather than being done with creates resistance. I've seen teams reject innovations that they themselves proposed not 6 months earlier, simply because the final decision came from leadership without their involvement. The third is concerns about competence. This one's tough because people rarely voice it directly. They're worried that they won't be able to adapt, that they'll look foolish during the learning curve, or that younger team members will pick up the new way faster. I once worked with a veteran manager who fought a new project management system tooth and nail. It wasn't until a private conversation weeks later that he admitted that he was intimidated by the new technology and afraid of looking incompetent in front of his team. And the fourth is disagreement with the change itself. Sometimes your team members have legitimate concerns about whether this change is the right move. They will see risks that you haven't considered, or they understand customer needs that you may have missed from your vantage point. This is actually the most valuable form of resistance because it can save you from making costly mistakes. So here's the critical insight that you need to diagnose which type of resistance that you're dealing with, because each requires a different type of response. Treating fear of the unknown the same way that you treat legitimate strategic disagreement will backfire every time. So, how do you diagnose it? If you have to create safe spaces for honest conversation, And I mean really safe, not the kind of safe where you say, my door is always open, when your people know that disagreement with management or perhaps with you is career limiting or career threatening. So try this in your next one on one with someone who is resisting. Ask them these three questions. Question number one: what concerns do you have about this change? Number two: what would need to be different for you to feel more comfortable? And number three: what am I missing? Then, and this is critical, listen. Actually listen. Don't defend, don't explain, don't convince. Just listen and take notes. You will learn more in that 10-minute conversation than in a dozen team meetings. All right, so now that we understand what drives resistance, let's talk about how to lead through it. I'm going to share a framework that I've developed over 15 plus years of change management work. I call it the 4 C's of change leadership: clarity, connection, capability, and celebration. Let's start with clarity. Most change initiatives fail because of a clarity gap. Leaders understand the why well before the change. They've been in the planning meetings, they've seen the data, they've debated the options, but your team is hearing about this for the first time, often in a way that feels vague or threatening. This is when you need to over communicate. I'm talking about repeating your message 7 to 10 times and in different formats. Here's what that looks like in practice. Start with a team meeting where you explain the what, the why, and the when. Follow that up with a written summary that people can reference. Hold smaller group discussions where people can stop and ask questions. Share updates in your regular team meetings and send periodic email reminders about what comes next. And then finally, create simple visual aids, like a timeline, a one pager, or an FAQ document. But here's the key: your message needs to answer 5 specific questions that every team member is silently asking themselves. Number one, why are we changing? Number two, why now? Number three, what's in it for me personally? Number four, what happens if we don't change? And number five, what exactly do you need me to do differently in my daily work? Let me give you a real example. I work with a manufacturing company that needed to adopt lean principles. The CEO gathered and created a town hall meeting and announced broadly, we're going lean to improve efficiency. That was it. Resistance from the team was immediate. What people heard during that town hall was, we're going to cut jobs. 3 months of turmoil could have been avoided if he'd simply said, our largest customer has told us that they're moving to our competitor unless we can reduce defects by 30%. If we don't change, we'll lose 40% of our revenue and have to lay off a third of the workforce. But if we adopt lean principles, we can not only save those jobs, but also hire more people as we win back market share. Here's what that means for your daily work. You see the difference there? It was the same change, but framed completely differently. The second C is connection. People don't resist change, they resist being changed. So you need to connect them to the process, not just the outcome. This means involving your team in the how, even if the what is non-negotiable. Form a change coalition. Identify the influencers on your team, not necessarily the formal leaders, but the people that others trust and listen to. Bring them into the planning process early. Give them real decision-making power over implementation details. Let them be the ones to communicate the change to their peers. I'm a big believer in pilot programs for this reason alone. Instead of rolling out a change to your entire team at once, create a small pilot group. Let them test it, break it, and then suggest improvements. Then those team members become your ambassadors. When other employees hear, I was skeptical too, but here's what we learned. That right there is infinitely more powerful than anything you as the leader could ever say. Here's a practical tool. Create a change feedback loop. This could be a simple shared document where team members can post questions, concerns, or suggestions. Commit to responding to every input within 48 hours. And when someone makes a good suggestion, implement it and then publicly credit them. You will be amazed at how quickly resistance transforms into ownership. The third C is capability. You can have perfect clarity and deep connection, but if your team doesn't feel capable of executing the change, you'll still face resistance. This is where training and support become absolutely critical. But I'm not talking about a one time training session. That's where most organizations go wrong. They bring in a trainer for a day, everyone sits through a presentation in a conference room, and then they're expected to just magically adopt new behaviors. That's not how adult learning works. Instead, think about building in capability in layers. Start with the fundamentals, the basic knowledge that everyone needs. Then provide job specific training. How does the change affect the work of your sales team differently from your operations team? Next, create ongoing support systems, maybe office hours where people can come and get help, or peer mentoring partnerships, or something as simple as a quick reference guide that they can consult. And here's another thing that most leaders miss. You need to create psychological safety for mistakes. When you ask people to change how they work, they will make mistakes. They'll try the new process and mess it up. And if the response is criticism or blame, or even worse, punishment, people will retreat to the old way of doing things, even if they hide it from you. I love the approach that one leader used. She instituted learning lunches during the transition period. Once a week, the team would gather and people would share their mistakes from trying the new process, but frame them as learning opportunities. The person with the most creative failure won a gift card. It completely changed the culture from one of fear to one of experimentation. The fourth C is celebration. Change is hard, it's exhausting. And if all your team experiences is the difficulty without any acknowledgement of progress, they will simply burn out. You need to mark milestones. This doesn't mean throwing a pizza party every time someone fills out a form correctly, but it does mean intentionally recognizing progress, both big and small. Create a visible progress tracker. Maybe it's a chart in your team area showing adoption rates or a timeline with checkpoints. When you hit 25% adoption, acknowledge it. When the first team member completes the transition, celebrate them as trailblazers. When somebody who was initially resistant becomes a champion of the change, tell their story publicly. And here is a powerful but underused technique. Celebrate the endings, not just the beginnings. When you're changing processes, you're asking people to let go of something. Maybe it's a system that they themselves built or a way of working that they have perfected over the years. Honor that. I've seen leaders hold retirement ceremonies for old processes, literally acknowledging what served the organization well in its time before moving on. It may sound silly, but it gives people permission to grieve the loss before embracing something new. So that's your framework: clarity, connection, capability, and celebration. Each of those builds on the other. You can't have genuine connection without clarity. You can't build capability without connection. And celebration without the others is just empty cheerleading. So let's get practical, because even with a great framework, you're going to encounter some challenging scenarios. Let me walk you through the four most common ones and exactly how to handle them. Scenario number one is the high performer who becomes a vocal resistor. This one is absolutely gut wrenching. You have someone who is excellent at their current role, who the team respects, and who's now actively undermining the change. they're making sarcastic comments in meetings or actively encouraging others to work around the new process, maybe even threatening to leave. First things first, don't ignore it. I've seen leaders avoid this conversation because they're afraid of losing the person. But here's what happens: their resistance gives everyone else permission to resist. The change stalls, and you lose credibility as a leader. Instead, have a direct and private conversation quickly. You can use this script. I've noticed you have concerns about the new process. You're one of our top performers, and your perspective matters. I want to understand what's really driving your resistance. Can we talk about what's going on? And then listen. Really listen. Often, high performers are worried that they'll lose their edge. They've mastered the current system and are afraid of appearing incompetent during the learning curve. So here's your move: acknowledge their expertise and then give them a leadership role in the change. Something like, look, I understand this feels threatening to your mastery, but I need your expertise to make this change and this transition successful. I want you to help train the team members and identify potential problems before they happen. Will you do that for me? You've reframed them from being a resistor to a contributor. 9 times out of 10, this works. And if it doesn't, if they still continue to actively sabotage the change after you've involved them, then you have a performance issue that needs to be formally addressed. Scenario number two: the silent majority who passively resist. This one is insidious. In meetings, people nod and smile, but back at their desks, they're still doing things the old way. You don't have an open rebellion. You have quiet noncompliance. The mistake leaders often make here is assuming that silence means engagement. It doesn't. It usually means that people are confused, scared, or waiting to see if this change is real or just the next flavor of the month. Your solution here is to make compliance both visible and inevitable. This means changing your systems and processes to make the old way harder than the new way. If you're implementing new software, turn off the old system by a clear date. If you're changing an approval process, actually enforce it. Send back anything that doesn't follow the new procedure, but combine that enforcement with heavy, heavy support. Embed champions on each team who can answer folks' questions in real time. Create templates and checklists that make the new way easy and provide regular updates on adoption. Things like, this week, 60% of our expense reports use the new system. And here are the common mistakes that we're seeing and how to avoid them. Scenario number three are the legitimate concerns that you initially dismissed. Here's a humbling truth: sometimes the resistors are right. I've been in situations where I pushed a change hard and treated resistance as an obstacle to drive through. And then 6 months later, realized that my team had been trying to tell me something important that I simply refused to hear. Maybe you chose software that doesn't integrate with a critical system. Maybe you underestimated the training time that was needed. Or maybe there's a customer impact that you didn't see from your vantage point. When you realize that you missed something, your ego wants you to push forward anyway. Don't. Stop and acknowledge it publicly. Things like, I've been hearing concerns about X, Y, and Z, and I need to admit that I didn't take them seriously enough. You were right, and I was wrong. Here's what we're going to do differently. That takes courage, but the credibility that you gain is invaluable. Your team will trust you more, not less, because you showed that you can admit mistakes and adjust course. Scenario four is change fatigue from too many initiatives. This one is especially common in organizations that chase every new trend or fad. You're implementing new software, you're restructuring teams, you're changing the performance review process, and rolling out a new strategy all at the same time. Your team is exhausted and cynical. The solution here requires discipline. Ruthlessly prioritize. Look at every change initiative and ask, Is this critical or just nice to have? Can it wait? Can we combine it with something else to reduce disruption? And then communicate clearly. Something along the lines of, I know we've asked a lot of you. Here are the only two change initiatives for this quarter. Everything else is on hold until these are successfully implemented. And then protect your team's time. I've seen leaders mandate that 20% of work time be protected from change initiatives. It's buffer time to absorb disruption and maintain business as usual. When people know they have protected space to do their core work, they're more willing to embrace change and experiment in the remaining time. All right, we are in the home stretch. Let's talk about how you know if you're succeeding and how you sustain the change over the long term. Most leaders measure the success of change by adoption rates. What percentage of the team is using the new process? Now, that's important, but it's not sufficient alone. You need a broader set of metrics. I suggest tracking these 5 indicators. Number 1, adoption rate, yes, but also proficiency. Are people going through the motions or are they actually mentoring and mastering the new way? Number 2 is sentiment. How do people feel about the change? Use quick pulse surveys or temperature checks in meetings. Number 3 is business impact. Is the change driving the results that you promised? Number 4 is retention. Are you losing people over this change or customers? And number 5 is momentum. Is the pace of the change accelerating or stalling? Create a simple dashboard that tracks these monthly. Share it transparently with your team. When the metrics are good, celebrate. When they're not, acknowledge it and adjust your approach. Now, sustaining momentum, this is where most change initiatives die. You hit that magic 70% adoption and declare it a victory, but that last 30% never fully transitions. And slowly the organization drifts back to the old way. To prevent this, you need to embed change into your systems across the board. Update job descriptions to reflect new responsibilities. Change your onboarding process to teach the new way as this is how we do things. Modify your performance evaluation criteria to assess proficiency with the new process. Hire for people who have the skills and the mindset that the change requires. I also recommend the 90-day check-in. 3 months after you think the change is complete, gather your team and ask what's working, what's not, where are we slipping back to old habits, and then make any adjustments. Change isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires continuous attention. And then finally, document your lessons learned. What would you do differently next time? What worked better than expected? Create a simple change playbook for your organization so that the next initiative is smoother than this one. I've seen companies reduce change implementation time by upwards of 40% simply by learning from prior experiences. Remember, the goal isn't just to implement this change successfully, it's to build your team's capacity for change so that the next transition is even easier than this one. Every change you lead is practice for the next one. So let's bring this all together. Leading through resistance to change is one of the most important skills that you can develop as a leader. And the key insight that I want you to take away is this: resistance isn't your enemy, it's information. It's telling you what your team needs from you in order to be successful. When you encounter resistance, get curious instead of getting frustrated. Diagnose the root cause. Is it fear, loss of control, concerns about competence, or those legitimate strategic disagreements? Each requires a different response. Then apply the 4 C's. Clarity about what's changing and why. Connection that involves your team in the how. Capability building through training and support. And finally, celebration of progress along the way. When you face difficult scenarios, the vocal resistor, the silent majority, or the legitimate concerns that you missed, or the change fatigue, you now have specific strategies to address each one of those. And remember to measure what matters, not just adoption rates, but sentiment, proficiency, impact, retention, and momentum. Then embed the change into your systems so that it sticks. Here's your action step for this week. Identify one change initiative that you're currently leading or about to launch. Write down the 4 types of resistance that you might encounter. Then plan your response for each using the 4 C's framework. You'll be amazed at how much more smoothly the change unfolds when you are prepared. Change is hard, but with the right approach, you can transform resistance into engagement, skeptics into champions, and obstacles into opportunities for your team to grow stronger together. Thanks for listening to Toby Talks. If this episode was valuable to you, share it with another leader who's navigating change. And I'd love to hear your change leadership stories. Send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Until next time, lead with courage and compassion.